Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, we are all searching for ways to better evaluate players in order to give meaningful feedback. Over 15 years ago, I put together a test called the JAMODI Skill Rating. The JSR takes players through a series of tests involving basketball skill or athleticism, giving them one rating at the end. Their JSR rating will give you clarity on what needs to be discussed with players and parents on areas they need to focus on improving. I test our players at least 4 times each year. They're able to compete against each other, past players' scores, and most importantly, their past performances. If you'd like to start testing your athletes, email me at jamodipodcast@gmail.com for more information.
It's just respect. It's really what it is. It's just respect. I mean, I think that I say this on different things, but I think that the high school coach, and the college coach can learn from the pro coach in terms of terminology, efficiency, just cutting right to the chase. The practice is quick. The practice is efficient. There's no wasted motion. We don't spend a lot of time. And also that the language is tight and everything is unemotional, but diagnostic prescriptive, right? But when, the pro coach should learn from the high school coach, the pro and college coaches should learn from the high school coach, which is, I'm glad from my experience, having coached, 10 years in middle school and high school, is that, sometimes you're in the college or you're in the pros and the coaches are like, man, we need better players. GM needs to get me better players. The assistant coaches, you guys got to get me better players. We need to recruit better. And you don't take ownership over the team that's in front of me is the team that I'm in charge of. And it's my job to get these guys good, whoever they are. That's what the high school coach does. And sometimes the pro and college coaches lose sight of that. Whoever's in front of you is your team and it's your job to get the best out of them.
Man, great reminders right there. It made me think of when Wes Watson, he's at McKinney High School and I was his varsity assistant for 5 years. And after it's interesting about what you learned after moving on from Dripping Springs. That's where we were. After moving on from there, what I learned after losing seasons here and what me and Wes learned after losing seasons, I think a lot of the best growth in our profession, our lives, comes after failure or downtime. Like if you allow it, right? And so we had a rough season and we wanted to make a change. He wanted to press. I wanted to get playing a little bit more up-tempo offensively, and dribble drive was becoming a big thing with Calipari at Memphis, which shows the date of that. But we kind of sat there like, well, can we do this if we don't have shooters? But it was kind of this light bulb moment. Well, what can we do? Because we're not going to go out and just find some shooters. We got to create them. We got to make them here. And that was a big shift in our mindset. So I think what can a coach take from that is, how do you love to play? What do you want your program to be like? And if you can't go out there and nowadays buy it, right? Find it. Do you create it? And I think that's maybe where it goes back to the creativity and drills and culture, knowing who you are comes into play.
And I think that's the thing that I think has been good for me is just the range. What allows me to be a good professional or allowed me to be a good professional coach is the fact that I teach in such a way that it could be picked up by a 7th or 8th grader.
Nice.
Okay. And that's not because I'm dealing with people who can't pick up bigger concepts. It's because that's what good teaching is. You know what I mean? It's not supposed to be tricky to figure out how, we're doing what we're doing. And that's, another quote that I like is I think it was an American general, maybe MacArthur, but he says, my job isn't to give orders that can be understood. My job is to give orders that cannot be misunderstood. And I think that's what I find to be the rubric for the directions that if I'm giving directions, they have to be so clear that they cannot be misunderstood. It's not enough that somebody could pick them up. It's got to be that nobody can misunderstand them.
And Danny Henderson said that at a clinic, and he would actually have one of the players. he would give him the direction, and he'd say, now I want you to tell your teammates in a way that they cannot be misunderstood. And you see the kid, he'd say, he'd be like, nope, not loud enough. They cannot. And then he would hold the whole group accountable if it wasn't run correctly. I think a big takeaway from me in that is the ability to say less. Like in practice, say less, but still get your point across. Maybe film yourself one practice and just count on a clicker how long you're actually talking, how long it takes you to teach things. That may be helpful.
Yeah, another one that I think is good is instead of, you'll say you've taught something, that's going back to checking for understanding, but, instead of saying, hey, I can't believe you didn't tag right there, you're the single side or whatever, you're tagging the loaded side or whatever. I just go back to, set that play up again. Okay, run that action. Okay, instead of saying, you should have done this, I'd say, Matt, show me what you're supposed to do right there in the low hole. Y'all run the action. Boom. He does it, and he tags, and he gets back out. He does it right. I say, well, okay, what did you just do?
Yeah.
It was different. And he'll be like, oh, I was out here. And then I said, okay, so now you know what we got to do. Yeah, got it. So let's go to it. And that's a different way of getting to the heart of the matter, where you put that person right into the problem solving, matrix there, where they have to tell you. And then what happens is when you say, show me, and they show you something wildly different, it's a way of you finding out that your teaching wasn't as clear as it needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of blaming the players, extreme ownership says, like, I'm not doing something right enough.
Right. And it's just, again, these are just ways to, again, just check for understanding. It's just reducing blind spots. You know what I mean? And another thing, on these notes of like, you're learning, it's from Dave Bullwinkle too at Snow Valley back when, years ago, but I always took it. And then I read the Teach for a Champion book, and it had one of these strategies in here, but I'll do this at the end of practice, especially in training camp or at any practice. I'll say, hey, close your eyes, and I'll wait. Coach Bullwinkle used to say, just, tell me one thing you learned today. One thing you learned. And the kids would pop up. And what I learned from Teach Like a Champion was, I'd say, I want you to think about everything we did today and just close your eyes. When you're ready, raise your hand, and I'm going to wait for everybody's hand to be raised, and then I'll call on somebody. And then I'd say one thing you learned today. And then what I'd force the students or players to do is think back to the start of practice.
Yeah.
And make them internalize all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, when I went 12 around, no, he said that already. There's one more. They couldn't believe all the things that you could pick out 12 things every day that are completely, you wouldn't be able, you'd be amazed. You could pick up 12 things every day in practice. And then when you make the players do that, you're making them recruit all that information. And then when they're hearing it from somebody else and they're thinking, man, I just had to think about that. And the one thing I came up with was closing out with a high stick hand early on a closeout or whatever. And he can't know what he thought about transition. That's right. I forgot about that and so all of a sudden you create like engagement because they're wondering, what is anyone else going to come up with this answer for?
And I wrote down, like, and also I feel like it helps us not to be fooled. And what I mean by fooled is thinking that our players are getting it, thinking that they have the culture down, that they know what the expectations are. Because if you're only going off of little Timmy, who answers every time that you just ask a question, okay, you're assuming what he's saying the entire group gets. And I think the more that we can do things like that, because you don't want to tell little Timmy, hey, no more today. You've answered enough. But you want to know if everybody's getting and hear more voices. And I think that's a great way.
It's critical because you're right. Little Timmy is the one who's drowning out the blind spots.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I'd wait. And, usually some of those kids who are kind of either too cool, or too shy, to use point guard terminology.
There you go.
But too cool or too shy at the end, they you just crack through. And basically, again, you are creating an environment where participation is expected, it's rewarded. And if you as a coach kind of cringe when you hear some of these strategies like, ooh, I would never want to ask my kids what they learned today, or I would never want to tell a kid, hey, show me what you're supposed to do here. And that makes you cringe as a coach because you're like wondering what might happen. That's its own indicator to you that that maybe your teaching isn't as clear and tight as it needs to be, such that it can be held to that standard.
Yeah. And there's a level of giving up control there, because you're giving up control of time because every coach is jealous of their time, right, in practice. But you're also giving up control to other voices. And I know as a younger coach, that was really hard for me to do. How we frame these things, the words, the way we ask questions, so important too. And to go back to PGC, a big thing that they taught, Chad was the one that I took away, was how you ask for questions. And so the way this sounds is what I think I used to do and what most coaches. Any questions? Any questions? The problem with that, I never thought anything of it, coach. I just thought that's a normal way to ask that question. But when you ask it like that, there is going to be fear, a feeling of fear of, ooh, I don't want to be the one that looks like an idiot and is the only one that has this question, even though we all know probably more people. So the way that you free them up is you ask, what are your questions? What are your questions? Instead of any questions, what are your questions? As if it is assumed that there will be some and that is encouraged that there are some. But you can take that little phrase right there, but think of everything that you're saying to players. Why that shot? Hey, let's talk about that shot. What are your thoughts on that shot? How would you rate that shot? The way that we ask these questions, coach, we can dive into the deeper part of what players are really feeling, or I think, like you said, we can make them feel unsafe.
I think so. I think, one of the things I learned when I was at Austin High, I took a training for History Alive, which was a history book that we had, and they had training for teachers. And it was probably the best training that I ever took in terms of teaching, and it worked with their textbook and it had all kind of things that worked with it, but it was really good. But I mean, just the idea of just think, pair, share, or visual discovery, like sometimes I'll have a slide up there with stats or something that I'm wanting to, demonstrate to the guys. And I'll just say, Steph, tell me one thing you see here on the screen. There's no wrong answer. Just tell me one thing you see. And they'll be like, there's about a big numbers here. I said, yeah, those are the numbers. Those are the points per shot, on this shot chart here. So that tells you when a shot gets taken from that area, how much it's worth, then all of a sudden I was like, okay, so I made it okay to just discover without, knowing the whole answer. And when you do the think, pair, shares, do that all the time with our guys, just what's one thing that's going wrong with the team, one thing we could do better, write it down in your phones. Okay. All right. Now partner up with somebody, you guys discuss it. Okay. Pick somebody who's going to share it. And all of a sudden you have a discussion. It's fantastic. Right. And everybody's primed and everybody's participating because you warmed them up just like we warm up, dynamic warm up our body. You got to do that with the mind and with communication too.
You've connected this so much throughout our talk about teaching. And I think as coaches, most of us would say we teach the game, but you're talking about training, for classroom teaching, but how that's crossed over into how you coach. In your opinion, what is the connection between teaching and coaching when some people from the outside might see at every high school there are coaches and there are teachers, and that there's a difference between those two, but how do you connect them?
Well, I think they're one and the same, but I think that basically coaches a lot of times are getting to teach the student's favorite subject, and in this case in basketball. But what's sad about that, and what's telling of why it is teaching, I think, is because here's what I'd say is we've all had teachers. For instance, I'm not like a math zealot or somebody who's I'm not against math, I'm not against science, I'm not against English. I don't think I was just excited about any one of them to a high level. But what would excite me to go to class was teacher, right? And so sometimes, I had chemistry, which is brutal. I had a great teacher and I actually didn't mind it much, right? And I had maybe, something that I enjoyed more, journalism or something writing wise. And the teacher was really bad at history and the teacher was brutal, and I didn't want to, I remember it was a UT, there was a guy, old prof, he'd get up there, 90-minute class, and straight up at the podium, just talk for 90 minutes straight on just from that moment in history to the end of 90 minutes. And there was nothing more to it. But one thing I want to say to coaches here, which is something we take for granted, is there's nothing worse than having the teacher make the subject that you love unenjoyable. And so many times coaches, we do that with basketball or with a sport, and we've got eager students, but we don't do our part to be in command of our curriculum, in command of our competencies, in command of our craft. And we don't respect the people. And what happens is we take the best subjects on earth and we make them unenjoyable. And that is just a cardinal sin, but that's why coaching is teaching. You know, you have to, they're students, they're learning. Learning is completely an enjoyable thing. No human does not like to learn new things. That's just not how we're built. But a lot of times, you know, when we make it just a box checking exercise, or we don't connect what we're doing on a daily basis with greater purpose, yeah, that coaching goes away from teaching. I think that building the two together is what just makes it more relatable.
Coach, I almost feel like I need to show you, but while you were first talking about this, I just made a little note because I was ready to come back around to it. I said, don't steal their joy. They love it. Like that, you nailed it. Like, I was an English teacher for 5 years at McKinney. Between you and me, I couldn't stand it. Like, I had no passion for it. They just made me do it. I wanted to be a speech communications teacher because I actually went to school for that. But like some places, they don't put you in the best spot to be successful. Well, maybe that's another thing too. Like, do we know what makes our players successful and put them in those spots? But I used to go into that every day, like almost feeling like I was in their shoes of, guys, this is brutal what we're doing here. Like, I get it, and try to, but in a creative way, actually try to get them to get work done but in basketball, like, we don't have to do that because most of them are choosing to be there and they love it. So what's our responsibility? Man, don't steal their joy. Like, being a kid is hard. I don't care what era you grew up in. I had teammates that were like kind of physically abusive sometimes in high school. It was hard. Like, I tried to do my very, very best not to. Sometimes, man, these kids, like, what they have going on at home. Like, what if this is the best hour of their day? Like, we need to be protectors of that. I'm so glad that you said that.
I agree with that, but there's a lot of manifestations of stealing their joy. Sometimes it's that you make it like you berate them. Sure, you belittle people. That's not fun. But sometimes you don't grow them. You
challenge. You don't challenge them.
You don't challenge them, and that's not joyful either, right? And sometimes you don't know that you need to challenge them some days and reward them other days. And you just it's just like a parental relationship almost, right? Where you have to give and take. And I think that some people would, if we just left it at don't steal their joy, somebody would say, well, that means keep it fun.
Yeah, just play knockout the whole day.
Right. And it's not just about, but what I guess that's another thing is redefining fun, and creating a shared definition of what that joy is. And that joy can be, man, taking on a big undertaking, like working together to solve big problems, learning how to communicate in a way that we've never done before, and to be able to trust people in a way that we never have experienced before, being able to do things in front of lots of people that are so impressive that we could have never thought were possible if we didn't do certain things. These are all things that we get into sports for, but that's the joy of it, is actually achieving the hard things, and not just, rolling out the ball and doing whatever.
Coach, I love that, redefining fun. And so I just kind of, and I don't want to be disrespectful to you. I was listening to what you're saying, but I also was like, what would be my definition of fun? And I think, man, if a coach is sitting here, like, take a second here, jot it down. Mine is, here's the equation. Standards. So, like, we know what things should look like and feel like if it's done right. Plus experimenting. Like, if this is our laboratory, what happens in a laboratory? Explosions, we mess up. It can be messy, plus great effort. That, all those three things in my mind, that equals fun. And there's going to be tough times in that and a lot of mistakes in that. And we're going to feel the weight of the standards some days, just like it's bearing down, but also some days those standards freeing us up to be in an environment where we can't experiment. But all of it, there has to be great effort, or else it's just rec ball, and that's not fun. So yeah, love that. Redefine your fun.
Well, and you have to ask them. That's a classic think, pair, share. What will season enjoyable? And then they just write. Hey, you got 2 minutes. Write it down on your phone. We'll make this season. Or this season will be a success if blank. And just making people answer these essential questions that we should all kind of, and just let that discussion happen, and more often than not, that discussion leads to exactly the same answers you would have presented to them as a coach or teacher, but it's way different when it comes from them. And, I think that's so key, is like letting them be like sort of the tour guide that gets them almost to their own destination sometimes. And then whatever they don't say, you can kind of lead them to the one or two parts they didn't hit. And you can say, but there's also this piece too. What do you guys think about this? Oh, yeah. We think that's good too. Okay. And, just having that dialogue is critical.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.